Nostalgia can be a pretty powerful tool, being able to bring out one's fond emotions as a marketing ploy, not to mention the nostalgia we have for certain things holds a certain effect over us. There's nothing wrong with the concept of nostalgia. In fact, it can be a very nice thing to indulge into sometimes. I also feel it's important for franchises to keep acknowledgements of their roots if they are to maintain any consistent identity. Otherwise, you get games that lose that sense of identity, even if they may be decent. At the same time, however, evolution and advancements in design are important. Relying too much on the past and disregarding the creative and progressive advancements that have been made can be very detrimental. While nostalgia can be nice, great even, there is a saying, too much of a good thing can fuck you up. Well, that's not exactly how it goes, but you get the point. And this, of course, relates to today's subject, Cynical Nostalgia Pandering. Cynical Nostalgia Pandering can take two forms, but both equate to the same core idea. Essentially what it is when a long-running series that had experimented and progressed in later entries ends up getting regressed to their earliest points to appease the protests of nostalgic fanboys who more or less want the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. This results in titles that are contemporary iterations of those classics that lack what made those classics work in the first place, and feel like a soulless attempt at reliving the glory days. Then alternatively, you have games that are supposed to be new experiences, but rely on constantly referencing and using stuff from past installments without building off of or doing anything interesting. Just having them there as a cynical way to sell off a game to longtime fans. A lot of these serious comebacks generally have this cynical, self-deprecating ideology that a franchise is only worthwhile that panders to classicistic fanboys and out-of-touch journalists. Because doing anything new and exciting with the formula automatically makes it bad and will ruin the series, even if they could be excellent if done correctly. Isn't that right, Sonic Team? Newsflash, shoving Green Hill Zone down our throats isn't going to deter from the fact that Sonic Forces has Burger King quality gameplay. Now, I don't think this self-deprecating ideology is entirely applicable to all retro comebacks. Like, I wouldn't say it's present in games like Sonic Mania and Mega Man 9. Well, it is present in MM9 to some extent. However, the toxicity is present when it comes to the discourse surrounding these games. You know, stuff like, classic Mega Man should only stay 8-bit and be exactly like Mega Man 2. Yes, because Mega Man 2 sure does hold up.
Not.
And of course, the ever-so-classic, Sonic has had a rocky history ever since he made the jump into 3D. Which is complete bullshit, by the way. Thank goodness for Sonic Mania, 2D Classic Sonic is all this series should always and ever be. You see why I hate shit like this? I think we get the point that the fetishization of nostalgia has been the creative demise for many franchises. However, let me stress that utilizing nostalgia is not inherently a bad concept. In fact, if utilized in an effective manner and as a way of evolving a series, it can actually result in something natural, progressive, and engaging. One game that may fall into this category is Crash Bandicoot 4. It's about time. Now, full disclosure, I have yet to play this game, and to avoid spoilers, I have kept my knowledge to just the trailers. That said, from what I've seen of the game, I'd honestly say that this is how you do a nostalgic sequel. It takes ideas from the past, but rather than half-heartedly shoving them in, it actually seems to be building off those ideas in natural ways. It's not going, hey, remember this thing from the past that you like, and then half-assedly inserting them in. Rather, it's going, hey, remember that thing from the past that you like? Now watch me do something cool with it. You like Dingo Dial? Well, you get to play as him. Isn't that fucking rad? Of course, stuff like this is best in moderation. Not to mention all the new things it's adding, like brand new mechanics, new environments. That's the main thing. It's mainly original and fresh. It doesn't use nostalgia as a crutch, but rather it uses it as a foundation. It just looks fresh, and I can't wait to sink my teeth into it. Figuratively speaking, that is. Then you have Devil May Cry 5. There are several nods and callbacks to previous games in the series, but it's done in so so well in a way that not only rewards longtime fans, but also radiates an emotional connection within the story. It's one of many reasons why I consider it to be one of the best finales of any series. Game, movie, TV show, what have it. So those are examples of it done right, but that's not why we are here. After all, this is a rant about cynical nostalgia pandering, and so this leads to me going over examples of it harming certain franchises. This leads to me talking about the big four. Let's start with Mario. In the early 2000s, Nintendo was hitting it with a creative renaissance. Given how the prior generation had them getting used to 3D, the 6th generation allowed them to essentially go all out. Wind Waker had a beautiful cartoony art style, Metroid was killing it in the 3rd dimension, F-Zero and Star Fox were still alive, and then you have Mario. Oh, Mario sure had a golden age during this time, doing all sorts of creative things rather than leeching off of one particular game. I know Sunshine had a lot of problems, but it was still such a fun, creative game. Though, on a technical standpoint, I can see why one wouldn't like it. However, it's very apparent that because a lot of these games were so out there, in existence came an outcry of older fans clamoring for more Mario 3-like stuff. People saying that 3D Mario isn't true Mario, and so on and so forth. Then the new Super Mario Bros. Series happened, and that sort of caused a chain reaction. Initially going into the Wii era with Mario Galaxy, that charm and creativity was still present, but then we reached 2009 with New Super Mario Bros. Wii. That's when things went south, and would continue to get worse into the Wii U era. I would not say anything bad about the original New Super Mario Bros. It's a really great game that elevates the 2D Mario formula, and is a great and really tightly designed game. The problem lies within its 4 sequels. Yes, I said 4, because New Super Luigi U was released as its own game, despite being an overglorified expansion pack. If that isn't an indication of how down bad Nintendo was during the Wii U era, then I don't know what is. The NSMB sequels are just cookie-cutter imitations of what came out on the NES, and the effect they had on the rest of the series was not just spread to the 3D games, but also the spin-offs, dumbing them down and trying to shove in as much Mario 3 as possible. The cinematic nature of games like 64, Sunshine, and especially Galaxy, gone. The Mushroom Kingdom, which was portrayed as a cool fantasy-like setting, was then reduced to generic grassland areas. The same 8 world themes were continuously rehashed, and the general tone was off. What was a series that could appeal to all ages kinda became sorta dumbed down and juvenile. Most fans would agree that the Mario series was at a creative roadblock in the late 2000s and early 2010s. But we did get a silver lining, in the form of Super Mario 3D World, a game that actually attempted to be creative and was also pretty fun as well. There was a healing process in place. Then came Odyssey, and we basically got the first truly unique Mario game since Galaxy. Sure, there were still nods and recycled elements from previous entries, but much like Devil May Cry 5, it's done in a well-crafted, passionate way. So, Mario is in a better place than he was in the early 2010s. But Nintendo is not exactly off the hook, especially regarding a certain re-release that they shut out recently, but I'll tear into that later. Given my stated distaste for franchises regressing for the sake of nostalgia-blind fanboys, you'd think that I have an issue with Mega Man 9, but you may be surprised to see that I actually think it's a really good game, mainly because of its strong weapon selection and the level design that utilizes it. But that's the thing, it needed a strong weapon selection to make up for the lack of a charge, shot, or slide, additions that had previously added more layers to the gameplay. In that sense, this game may as well have been an experiment to see how a selection of quality weapons can carry a Mega Man game. I'd like to think that that was the intended purpose of this game, and that it wasn't made like this to appease 8-bit purists. But let's face it, it was most likely done to appease 8-bit purists. A game like Mega Man 9 could have only really been done right once. If you were to try to make another Mega Man game with 9's limitations, you would have to go above and beyond with the weapons and level designs. And Mega Man 10 doesn't really deliver on that. Sure, it's an okay game, and I still sorta like it. I liked some of the weapons, and getting to play as Bass was neat, and the endgame was good, but regardless, it was really just Mega Man 9 all over again, just significantly lesser, and it honestly felt redundant. Needless to say, I prefer the direction 11 took, and even though I like 9, I wonder if instead we got a version of Mega Man 9 that actually tried to evolve the series forward, like what fan games such as Perfect Blue and Beyond are doing. Oh well, I can't be too mad. We got Mega Man 11, which still relatively and understandably played it straight, but actually attempted some new things while polishing up the gameplay. And besides, Mega Man had worse issues than nostalgia pandering in the 2010s. Like, being dead. But regardless, Mario and Mega Man are in a much better place now, experimenting once more while maintaining their series' core values and having that quality assurance to boot. But then you have the other half of the Big Four. And holy shit, holy fuck, is it depressing! Oh Sonic, what happened, man? I mean, here's Sonic 4, here's Generations, here's Lost World, here's Mania, and here's Forces. And holy shit! 5 out of the 7 main series platformers from the last decade with the same opening level each time! Now, Generations I understand. Levels from Sonic's past was the central concept, and it was the 20th anniversary game. At least then, going to Green Hill Zone, the real one, and a new game was a novel concept. A nice surprise every once in a while. Now, it's just an overdone trope. Oh, but I hear you typing. But it's only the first level! Yes, well, the nostalgia pandering doesn't stop after Green Hill. Almost every level in the Sonic 4 games are rip-offs of levels from the Genesis era. Lost World, a game with new Super Mario Bros.-esque design and level theming, tries to remind you you're playing a Sonic game by shoving a shit ton of classic Sonic imagery and mechanics down your throat till you gag on it. You have Sonic Mania, which reused levels, and then you have Forces, which also reused levels, and doubled down on the bullshit from Lost World. To give credit where credit is due, Mania is a great game that even though it reuses old levels, it does it in a way that they're redesigned in fun and imaginative ways. But still, that's an entire decade of main series Sonic games pandering to pedantic 90s babies. An entire decade of remember the good old days so you could forget those poopy 2000s games. Well, say what you will about the 2000s era of Sonic. Truth be told, there was a lot of crap there. But at least then, we were met with original locations, stories, actual world building, and side characters that were actually utilized well. Anyways, going back to Crash 4 once again, I see that game, oddly enough, doing a lot of the cool things Sonic did in the late 90s to early and mid 2000s. And doing it really well, might I add. That makes me both happy and sad. Happy as a Crash fan, but sad as a Sonic fan who misses some of this stuff in the series. But hey, no problem, let's just shove classic Sonic into modern Sonic games because the Genesis games are the only good Sonic games apparently. Adding classic Sonic will automatically improve the game and totally won't come off as redundant or negatively impact the game. Am I right? Of course, nostalgia pandering isn't the only issue modern Sonic has. It's just one of many, in a sea of many other issues like crap level design, rushed development cycles, etc, etc. Stuff that I will get into once I continue on with the Sonic retrospective, but nonetheless, I will say, going into the 30th anniversary, I'm more skeptical than anything, but I do have some hope, admittedly. That said, while I do have hope for Sonic having another quality game that's original, I unfortunately find it harder to find hope that Pac-Man will come out of its nostalgic infused shell. Well, never say never, as there's always hope for an eventual return. But as of now, this franchise has probably been hit the worst with nostalgia pandering. As is, it feels like this franchise is still kept alive only for the sake of cynical nostalgia pandering. Now, before somebody says it, I'm aware that the 8-bit maze games are what this series is most known for. But give me a damn break! Can we actually for once not go for a minimalistic art style and have an actual art style? Can we please not regress the mechanics and actually include things sequels added? Can we do something different instead of sucking off the original? Oh wait! We do have Mega Tunnel Battle, which seems to be in the right direction. Except for the fact that it's a fucking Stadia exclusive. Why? Because fuck you, that's why. Well, possibly it's a timed exclusive, but still, the fact that it's even a Stadia exclusive to begin with is quite telling of how mismanaged the series is. Well, I bet Mega Tunnel Battle is a neat game and all, and it seems like the developers that made it are trying to move the series forward, but even then, when I look at the game, I kinda have to ask, shouldn't there be more to this series? As is, we're kinda left with games that, aside from their core gameplay, still kinda lack in their content and are essentially the same thing each time. That's not to mention the egregious nostalgia pandering that even Mega Tunnel Battle is guilty of to an extent. I think 256 is a fun game with its emphasis on power-up usage and unique behavior for each of the ghosts. But aside from that, what more is there to it? The Championship Edition games are fun for their own worth, but I wouldn't want the whole series to be just this, just rehashing the past. Factor 5 Fanatics said it best, at some point you're just milking a cow that's already been processed into hamburgers. Let's just hope they're not from Burger King. There is some experimentation, but a lot of it equates to an arbitrary gimmick. Here's Pac-Man Waka Waka, a game you can control with your voice.
It broke new ground!
Get it? Because in the original game, it sounded like he was saying Waka every time he's eating a pep dot. Remember the first game? I clapped because I remember the first game! We aren't reaching the bottom of the barrel. This is the bottom of the barrel. I mean, I wouldn't mind having smaller scale games as long as we have much bigger, more experimental and adventurous titles every once in a while. And before somebody says it, no, this does not mean I'm begging for World 4 or another platformer. Granted, I really desire a World 4, and I do feel the series should experiment with platforming more, but it doesn't specifically need to be this or that. If anything, I'd love an adventure maze game with a full-on story, sprawling maze level design, dynamic camera angles, and emphasis on power-ups like in 256, a frantic, fast-paced nature of the Championship Edition games. Why can't we have something like that? Or, you know, something more than what we've been getting. Something that plays around with the maze formula in interesting ways. In fact, that's what the World Series did. To call them generic platformers that don't have anything to do with Pac-Man would be complete bullshit. But I'm saving that analysis for another day. Though, allow me to use this as an opportunity to segue. I'm very curious to see what the discussion for the late 2010s Pac-Man games will be like 10 to 15 years from now. What I'm getting at is that the World Series started 21 years ago and had its last game 15 years ago, or 14 if you count World Rally. They're still talked about to this day. They're certainly more talked about than anything that came after 2015. The World Series, Maze Madness, Pac-and-Roll, and Adventures in Time, to name a few, actually bothered to expand the world. It gave us characters, neat settings, stories that were simple yet effective, utilized elements of the maze formula in ways that worked with the gameplay, and had absolutely banger soundtracks. Granted, that last point is irrelevant, but still, I wanted to mention that. Hell, this was even apparent in not just the early 2000s, but also in the 80s and 90s, with each of the maze games after the original adding on to Pac-Man's family, and in turn adding on to the lore. Remember Pac-Land? Fun fact, apparently that's Toru Iwatani's favorite Pac-Man game, which says a lot. I know Pac-Man 2 is divisive to say the least, but it had a lot of character and charm put into it, and in general it added to the world. Meanwhile, we got games like Pac-Mania and Pac-Man Arrangement, which were simple arcade games like the original, but they added mechanics and built off of the gameplay of the original rather than pandering to it, and had really nice environments and art styles to boot. Now, I will not deny the early 2000s had its fair share of crap. No different than Sonic in the 90s though. I don't see how a GBA pinball game is that big of an issue when Mario got away with it, and it was just as bad, if not worse. But of course, I understand World 3 being a massive discouragement, but even after that and before Ghostly Adventures, we were still getting things to be excited about. But I know what arguments some of you may use. The World Series never sold that well in Japan! Again, I'm not specifically asking for World, but I might as well dismantle this argument. Sure, World 2 may have not sold as well in Japan, but the same can be applied to 3D Mario. Probably the main reason that series went into the direction it did in the 2010s, a direction that undermined the series as a whole, which led to Odyssey, a return to form for 3D Mario, revitalizing the series, putting it in a much better condition. Most of Pac-Man's success is owed to the US anyway. Times change and so do interests. With better devs and better marketing, I'm sure a Pac platformer, whether it's a World sequel or something entirely new, would work. And once again, I'm not saying the series should only be platformers. I don't know how many times I'm gonna have to run that into the ground, but I feel like I kinda need to because I know I would get that one comment otherwise. But of course, there's also that other argument one would use. Ghostly Adventures was a failure, so it's only reasonable to regress the series. I feel like this is an instance of Namco taking the wrong lesson from a situation, no different than what Sega does all the time. The issue people had with Ghostly Adventures is that it replaced what people had known with something else, to put it lightly. It deserves its flack for many reasons, though with the games I would go to it with open arms, given that it was a light return to the World Series. However, it simultaneously alienated fans, which had significant negative impact. So it's understandable why what had happened, well, happened. So let's hypothetically say that World 2's sales in Japan and Ghostly Adventures' failure mattered, which they don't, by the way. Then fine, that doesn't make it suck any less that this series has been deteriorated to this degree. I miss when the series had a universe with characters other than Pac-Man and the 4 ghosts. I miss all the cool different things the series did. Seriously, for the past 5 years, it's been the same shit. The same shit, but in HD! They've been milking the original for everything it's worth. That and smaller mobile games, most of which you can't even fucking play anymore. To add insult to injury, the last thing to come out of the series with the same sense of world and character was Pac-Man Monsters, a mobile game, granted, but one with a great art style and actual story, and even utilized characters from the World Trilogy and other games in the series. But guess what? It's been delisted! You can't play anymore! It's gone! It's lost to the void! Devoured by darkness! Or Bamco's basement, what have you. Pac-Man being stripped of his character and having his series regress to being a merchandise mascot with the occasional semi-nostalgic rehash, all in favor of pandering to pedantic elitist 80s babies, completely missing the point of the series in the process, is the worst thing to happen to the series, period.
Okay, so maybe I was a little bit extreme there. So why don't I level that off a bit? I am happy for the series getting inducted into the Comic-Con Hall of Fame. Not to mention, I will be shelling out for that cool new action figure. Seriously, that shit looks dope as hell. So, no, I'm not a Pac Doomer. Thank you very much.
And that's how the big four were pretty much affected. Mario and Mega Man have recovered, but Pac-Man and Sonic are in a desperate spot to say the least. As for some others I can quickly mention, I have never really gotten into Pokemon, but from what I have seen, many fans seem to be frustrated with the constant Gen 1 shelling, with them reusing Kanto a lot, and apparently giving Charizard like a million different evolutions. Just to name some examples, all I can say here is that I obviously empathize with their frustrations. I can't say that I'm a decent Kirby fan though, and it's easy to say that this series has had a bit of a reliance on nostalgia. It's kinda weird. It's more hit or miss with nostalgia, but mostly it tends to go a bit overboard. It's nice to surprise fans with a returning boss once in a while, but when you do it all the time, it kinda loses its novelty. But as I said, it's weird, because a lot of the time there is lore explanations for why certain things are reused and remixed. So I can vibe with that to an extent. And then there's Star Fox, and needless to say, it did not benefit the series to have its most recent entry, Star Fox Zero, be yet another reimagining of the SNES original. Probably the third time, even. Especially since prior to that game coming out, we got the 3DS remake of Star Fox 64, which was basically the second reimagining of the SNES original. This sorta leads into my next point. Remakes. Remakes are alone something I can make an entire video on, so I'll just make it brief here. I'm fine with remakes under certain circumstances, whether they be A, bringing back relevance to a dormant series and gauging interest for a new game, or B, taking a classic and improving it, maybe even expanding its scope. Putting those aside, however, I do take issue with the idea of constant remakes over and over again without something new being made. That said, I can't exactly name any series off the top of my head where this is apparent, though the Crash Bandicoot series was dangerously treading those grounds, having another remake, that being Crash Team Racing Nitro Fueled, coming right after the Insane Trilogy with no new game in between. All while drama ensued with the fans asking for more remakes, and fans who wanted a new game getting mad at the ones who want constant remakes. It was a mess, to say the least. But we got Crash 4, so it's cool. Then you have re-releases, and let me stress that re-releases of classic games are honestly a necessity for game preservation, especially given how pricey physical copies can be. Collections like the Mega Man Legacy series are great because of this, not to mention they go the extra mile by adding concept art, extra game modes, but best of all, they're good collections that aren't limited releases. Yeah, I basically hinted at talking about this. Nintendo can screw off with the shit they did with 3D All-Stars. In fact, they can screw off with most of the shit they did this year. But staying on topic, they're practically using nostalgia as a cynical business practice to manipulate fans into buying into their limited release dog shit. We're preserving these classics, but only for a limited time. Make sure you get your copy before it goes into the vault. Oh, fuck right off, Nintendo. This goes against the very concept of a 3D Mario collection, that being to preserve these games. This goes beyond cynical nostalgia pandering. This is nostalgic abuse. And it's not like this collection is good enough to make up for this. The menu design is bland as hell, and it's lacking in extra features like concept art, or interviews, old commercials, stuff that could have elevated the collection. And that's not even going over the apparent emulation issues. That said, it's really, really, really nice to see these three classic 3D platformers re-released on newer hardware, and that novelty may be enough for me to get it at some point before it's back into the vault. But as it stands, it's a really shitty manipulation of nostalgia and nostalgic fans for their cynical business practice. Getting all that aside, let us now discuss the final example of cynical nostalgia pandering, and this might be the biggest one yet. But for this, I have to clarify. Nostalgia pandering isn't just an issue of video games, rather it's an issue with entertainment as a whole. What I'm about to talk about is not only the biggest example of cynical nostalgia pandering, it's also one of the biggest franchises out there. That being...
And he's stunned.
Yep. I'm going there. Star Wars may be the biggest example of nostalgic usage out there, given that it's been around for more than 40 years. Regardless, the prequels were pretty controversial when they came out, and well, they do have a lot of issues, and the hate for them is understandable to a degree. I mean, they do have a lot of issues, not gonna lie, but you get really arbitrary criticisms from original trilogy purists, complaining about how it's not exactly like the original trilogy, so it's different and therefore ruined. Why is there politics? A lightsaber fight shouldn't be stylized. Completely missing the point of this trilogy, the story George Lucas was trying to tell, and Star Wars as a whole. That said, when Disney bought the rights to Lucasfilm and decided to have a new trilogy be made, guess who they listened to? These assholes. Episode 7 is a good movie on its own terms. It has mostly likable characters and is entertaining for the most part, but what it did for the world building as a whole and the way it tried to move this series forward by moving it backwards by rehashing the conflict of the original trilogy to appease OG trilogy purists makes it a complete disservice to the overall story. I get that it's hard to make a follow-up to Return of the Jedi, of all things, but regressing the story wasn't the answer. This would put its sequels in a rather unfavorable position. Rian Johnson, however, managed to work around this somehow and give us The Last Jedi, a movie that actually tried to evolve Star Wars. I know it wasn't perfect, but it was a breath of fresh air. But because it dared to actually be creative, fanboys cried out against it because it's different and therefore ruined. I'm not saying fans didn't have logical reasons for disliking it, but it's evident that Disney listened to the wrong crowd, so guess what? We got a finale with even more nostalgia pandering. Because of course, let's just make Return of the Jedi, but shitty. The Rise of Skywalker is undeniably proof that nostalgia pandering can be very detrimental. Like, yeah, let's just totally revive Palpatine. That totally won't invalidate Vader's redemption and sacrifice. It totally won't make a joke of Return of the Jedi's ending. Seriously, is this guy Sigma now? Are they gonna just bring him back over and over again and have him be the one who's pulling the strings each and every time? Don't get me wrong, Palpatine is great in the original trilogy as well as in the prequels, but his story was complete. Why bring him back and ruin him? Because nostalgic fan service, that's why. Oh, don't forget about how Rey is Palpatine's granddaughter, just like how Vader is confirmed to be Luke's father in Empire. Funny thing is, not only does it fail to understand why the Vader father reveal actually worked, and miss the point so damn hard it practically hits someone else in the head, but it also completely makes a joke out of, and erases the arc Rey had in The Last Jedi, about coming to terms with being a nobody, whose parents were druggies who didn't give a single shit about her. How about the scene during the climax where Rey is motivated by the ghosts of Jedi past, featuring fan-favorite characters, most of which shouldn't even be there, which means the movie missed the point of how one manifests their consciousness, as well as fucking up the way death works in the universe. Only for the sake of nostalgia pandering. Of course, this movie has more issues than nostalgia pandering. In general, it's a really bad movie with poor pacing, contradictions up the ass, cringe-inducing character interactions, and fanfiction bullshit writing that's almost on par, if not surpassing, Sword Art Online. But putting all that aside, and relating to the main purpose of this video, the emphasis of nostalgia pandering has had a major impact on this trilogy. In a negative way, might I add. That said, the way Cynical Nostalgia Pandering screwed up Star Wars is no different than the way it screwed up Mario for a time, as well as the way it's still screwing up Sonic. While this is mostly about video games, I wanted to bring up a movie franchise like Star Wars, not just because I felt the need to make a point that this issue extends outside of the gaming industry, that's a part of it, but also because it's to make a point that just like how movies are an art form, video games are also an art form. It's kinda hard to conclude this whole video without practically reiterating what I've already said. However, I will make an acknowledgement. Some people will say nostalgia pandering isn't a bad thing at all. Some would even say it's good. And you're welcome to think that. You don't have to agree. But as someone who has seen some of his favorite franchises struggle, continuing to become stagnant and lose a good chunk of their soul because of it, with Sonic becoming a self-deprecating joke and Pac-Man being confined to the same maze over and over again, losing any sense of world and character, I have to call that out as wrong. Regressing a series for the sake of nostalgia has never worked out in the long run. It didn't work out for Mario, it hasn't elevated Sonic, and it's been completely contradictory to Pac-Man. This over-reliance on nostalgia has led to vapid games and overall stagnation. The only way to counter such stagnation is through creativity. Series like Pac-Man or Sonic should be canvases, muses for creativity, to be built off of, expanded upon. If video games are to be understood as an art form, then it must be understood that experimentation and evolution is important.
Otherwise,
if you're going to hold on to the past, refusing to move on, not knowing what great things lie ahead, then what are you doing for yourself?
and that's all she wrote. Happy New Year's, and I'll see you all in 2021.
Meanwhile, we got games like Pac-Mania and Pac-Man Arrangement, which were simple art games. I can't fucking talk. Now, I will not deny, the early 2000s had its fair share of crap. No different than Sonic in the 90s, though. I don't see how a GBO... What the fuck is a GBO? The fuck is a GBO? What the fuck is a GBO? Given that it's been around for more than 40 years. Regardless, the prequels were pretty controversial when they came out, and, well, they... Motherfucker, are you kidding me right now?